Well, it's been 50 years since we declared the war on poverty, and we won. Jay Ambrose, syndicated columnist from around the nation. Good to see you again.
Hi.
All right, let's go back 50 years. LBJ says we're going to have this war on poverty. Now, I know Vietnam was a long war. I know the Iraq war was even longer than that, but this one has gone on now for 50 years.
50 years.
Did we win?
No.
No.
And I think Lyndon Johnson was sincere about it. And I think he really wanted to do some things. And he even had some good advisors. Daniel Patrick Moynihan was somebody who whispered a few things in his ears. And I think Daniel Patrick Moynihan was a wise liberal. There were lots of ideas out there. But what they mainly did was hand people money. And handing people money is not so bad a thing if you're in a bad way. And so people live better. But they didn't remove people from poverty. The poverty rate had actually gone down from something like 41% right after World War II to something like 19% by the criteria of that time. Wow. Without any programs of this kind at all.
So before the war on poverty,
we were doing something
we were
about
winning
poverty.
the war on poverty.
We were winning it before the war. The war actually embodied lots of disincentives.
Disincentives towards what?
Well, disincentives to work. And it wasn't just the war on poverty programs, it's other welfare programs as well. Aid to families with dependent children until it was reformed, as other programs ought to be reformed in 1996, was discouraging marriage because it paid more to you if you weren't married than if you were. And a lot of other programs, food stamps and others, discourage people from getting out and working.
But when you see somebody in need, there is this very human thing to go, I need to help you.
Absolutely.
I want to help you.
Absolutely.
There was a time when we did that through private charity.
Private charities
we've
are a
always
wonderful way to do it.
had poorer people, but in America, we give more to charity than any nation on earth.
Yes, absolutely. We're the most charitable people in the world. You know, people say we don't give as much in foreign aid as per capita as others, but when you add in the private that we give more than anybody in the world. It is amazing what we give. Let there be a tsunami in Japan and see who contributes the most, not just in absolute terms, but in per capita terms. It's us. We are extraordinary, and we should be, and I'm glad and I'm proud of that. I love it. And I want to help people who are down and out too, but you've got to help them in the right way. You don't want to help them in such a way as to actually be cruel to them. And that's what some of it has been.
Do you believe that the war on poverty, as it has been implemented, is cruel to the poor?
I don't think, I think cruel is maybe too harsh a word. But yes, I think it has hurt families horribly in many ways.
Would it be fair to say that it's put people in a cycle, that instead of being dependent on employment, you're now dependent upon government
and understand
handouts.
here, what I'm talking about their welfare programs outside of the ones in the war on poverty. A lot of them just didn't work. Do you know one of the things I really believe in is pre-kindergarten schooling for the disadvantaged if it works, if it's well done, if there's follow-up in the public schools. Head Start, by a randomized study done 2 years ago, doesn't work. $7 billion a year, it doesn't work. Those are $7 billion that could be done for other things, maybe for programs that could work. There is such a reluctance in government to step back and analyze and evaluate and say, are we spending this money correctly or not? You and I believe in a free market system where if you don't spend it correctly, you suffer. Immediately, you lose money and you go out of business. Government never goes out of business.
What was it that Reagan said? There's nothing closer to immortality than a new government program?
That's true.
All right, before we run out of time, let's go back. Let's reset the clock. Mr. Peabody goes in the Wayback Machine, and we could redo this. If you really wanted to have a war on poverty, and you had a 50-year window here to really make people better, what would you do? Or let me try it this way. If you could start today and make changes so that in 50 years there is a sizable difference on the cycle of dependency and the way we live.
Let me tell you what researchers, both in places like Brookings, which is liberal, and places like Heritage Foundation, which is conservative, say. If you could get every single parent, every impoverished single parent out there to marry, you would reduce poverty by 70% overnight. almost.
Which is funny because
extraordinary.
I'm a single guy, and so so send a resume. Why? So, I mean, this sounds really moralistic. It sounds that social con, families.
And when you say this, you arouse people's ideological fierceness, as in a radical feminist sending me emails when I write such things, saying, you chauvinist pig, don't you know that I raised my child well? Yes, there are lots of heroic mamas out there, heroic papas. Mostly it is single mothers. It's a question of needing two people to do this incredibly hard job. Going back to the 1830s, Alexis de Tocqueville, you go back to Aristotle, said the family is the center of society. Alexis de Tocqueville said, where do children learn responsibility? Where do they learn self-discipline? Where do they learn a sense of independence? Where do they learn respect for democratic institutions? In the home. One parent there trying to make some money over here, trying to raise the kid over here. Think for a moment about the mother in an inner city whose son is now a teenager and the gangs are knocking on the door. How does she handle that? What does she do? The right dad might. And the statistics are incredible. If you are a single parent, your odds, of course, there are lots of upper middle class single parents, right? But the odds of you being in poverty are 6 times greater, than with a 2-parent home. And this has been researched to death by everybody. Now, the problem, what in the world do you do about it?
Yeah, I was going to say, this is wonderful. Yeah, we agree with you, and unicorns are nice too. So is it going to become a governmental imperative? So does government now subsidize Match.com in order to get people to hook up with partners? So it's really easy to say,
I think
you'd be better if you had a partner.
The government programs have been tried unsuccessfully. And I'm not, I'm wary of that as someone who shares some of your libertarian instincts about, government becoming, right now, some people think government can simply be the substitute daddy, that it can go in there and do enough things.
I'll go one further. I think people think government is a substitute husband.
Yeah, some people think it's a substitute God,
Yeah, and this is why get a husband when you have government, and government's not going to step out on you with a secretary.
It doesn't work. It doesn't work.
All right,
it
so
absolutely doesn't work.
We've only got 5 minutes left, and I want to get to this. How do you encourage people to get married?
Well, one of the things that government can do is reform welfare programs that have the wrong incentives. Aid to families with dependent children. Let me just stay here for a minute. And because encouraging people to work is also part of what we need to do. Aid to families with dependent children with a Republican Congress led by a guy named Gingrich and a president in the White House named Bill Clinton. They came together on welfare reform. It changed aid to families with dependent children in 1996. There are a lot of people who said, you're going to throw 1 million children into poverty by this change that made it temporary 5 years and started having job requirements. Not that you absolutely must work, but you must be looking for work and so forth. And so what happened with this? There were more women finding jobs than ever before in history when this started happening. By 2001, 5 years later, mainly because of this, there was a lower rate of childhood poverty than at any time in this country's history. Even during the past recession, the women didn't return to the welfare rolls.
I'm going to push you because we're going to run out of time. That was then, and I agree with you, rolling welfare to the states was an incredible thing. Starting now, what kind of policies should we be promoting, not only to get families together, but also to end poverty?
I'll tell you what I think is required is a community effort. Here's a liberal who's doing some of the right things. It's Oprah Winfrey, who has shows on Fathers Come Home. I think it has to be cultural. What I think we could do, I think you could have something akin to the 1964 Surgeon General's report on smoking that said this stuff is killing you folks, whatever you think. And 50 years later, we went from 41% people who were smoking to 18%. We saved 8 million lives. It wasn't just the government doing things. It was the culture responding. It was people looking at themselves. I think it takes cultural. I think it takes people out there in their communities, leadership in the communities. I think it takes one of the things that's missing in our society today is the intermediary institutions doing the job that they used to do.
What do you mean? Churches is what I'm hearing.
Churches. Well, one of the things that's unfortunately happened, on the immobility and moving from poverty to the middle class. Well, it still happens, but you know when it happens most is when there's religion in the family. And this is a Harvard professor saying it.
Again, we're going to run on time like this. Before you convince me to go and join Focus on the Family, are there some other things that could happen that are less cultural, more policy related, that could really change the poverty? I mean, right now, I've got a president who says 10-10. That's what we need to pay people, 10-10. The way to get out of poverty, partly, is to raise the minimum wage.
The minimum wage is the Congressional Budget Office came out with its study, said you lose 500,000 jobs, maybe 1 million if you do it. Yes, some people get higher pay and move from. Do you know that it's 3% of the workforce, and that the average income of families with people with making the minimum wage is $53,000. It's hardly ever the head of a family who is making the minimum wage. What you do is you make some people suffer greatly so a few others can move up minimally. That is not an answer. There are answers. More free trade to get more jobs is an answer.
Let's go back to Clinton. Let's go back to Clinton again. The big fight was over NAFTA. I remember this. So Clinton signed a couple of important things that I supported. You mentioned welfare reform. NAFTA was this thing that was going to destroy America. All I know is now I can get fruits and vegetables year-round that weren't in season before. Does free trade work?
I brought this book, Rational Optimist, Matt Ridley, showing that free trade has been the best engine for helping people. Do you know that Africa is actually right now slowly moving out of poverty, not because of foreign aid, which doesn't do much good at all, but because of global trade. Slowly it's happening. People all over the world are living longer than they ever have been. They're healthier than they ever have been. There's less childhood disease than there ever has been. On and on and on. The Rational Optimist, folks. This is a classic book, but this is what's happening in the world right now. It's free trade. Right now, Obama actually wants new trade agreements with both Europe and with Asia, 10 nations in Asia besides Japan and the European Union. And Harry Reid is sitting there because the unions don't like it. There are some job dislocations as a consequence, but overall the wealth improves immensely for everyone.
All right, Jay Ambrose, thank you so much. We'll check back with you in 50 years to see how we do on war and poverty. Hey, listen for me on KHOW Radio. Tell a friend about the Independence Institute. That's independenceinstitute.org. And we'll see you next week.